The Prometheus tumbled through unfamiliar space, systems failing and emergency klaxons wailing. Alina gripped her command chair as the artificial gravity fluctuated, sending loose objects flying across the bridge. "Status report," she shouted over the cacophony. Chief Engineer Takahashi's voice crackled through the damaged comms. "The FTL cascade created some kind of spatial tear. We're stable, but I have no idea where we are. Nothing matches our star charts." Alina wiped blood from a cut above her eye and studied the main view screen, now flickering with static. Through the interference, unknown constellations glimmered against the void. Her gamble had saved them from immediate destruction, but at what cost? "Commander," Lieutenant Park called from the sensor station. "We've got internal injuries on decks 3 through 5. Life support is holding at 60% capacity." The gravity suddenly normalized, causing everyone to stumble. Alina steadied herself and made her way to Park Station, examining the damage assessment. 37 souls under her command, now possibly stranded beyond the reach of human space. "What about comms?" she asked. "Any chance we can send a message back to Earth?" Communications Officer Rivera shook her head, her expression grim. "Quantum array is fried. We're deaf and mute, Commander." Alina gazed around at her crew, scientists, explorers, and diplomats who never signed up for a one-way mission. Yet not one face showed panic, only determined focus on their tasks. Humanity's first diplomatic mission had become something else entirely, a fight for survival and a race to warn Earth about the threat they'd discovered. "The Concordat will assume we've been destroyed," she said, thinking aloud. "That gives us an advantage. They won't be looking for us." Dr. Maxwell, the mission xenobiologist, approached with a medical patch on his forehead. "I've been analyzing the Concordat's biological data they shared during the initial exchange. There's something odd about their evolution. All 17 species show evidence of genetic tailoring. They've engineered away their own genetic diversity." Alina raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "They've optimized their species for specific functions, eliminated what they consider redundancies, weaknesses. The gaseous wrecks don't even reproduce naturally anymore. They grow new consciousness nodes in cultivation chambers." Maxwell's eyes lit with scientific fascination despite their dire situation. "It explains their rigidity, their inability to comprehend our refusal to specialize." Alina remembered High Commissioner Zextroll's bewilderment when she'd explained that human diplomats weren't a separate subspecies bred for negotiation. What kind of inefficient evolutionary path produces generalists? The alien had asked, multifaceted eyes blinking in genuine confusion. "Gather the senior staff in what's left of the conference room," Alina ordered. "We need to assess our options." As crew members dispersed to their tasks, she stared at the alien stars. The Concordat had called humans primitive for maintaining biological diversity, for our emotional responses, for our wasteful creative thinking. Those same traits might be the only things keeping them alive now. In the conference room, the department heads gathered around a table strewn with emergency supplies. Alina surveyed her team, the engineer who wrote poetry, the security chief who played classical violin, the astrobiologist who had once been a professional chef. Messy, inefficient humans with overlapping skills and contradictory interests. Exactly what the Concordat had viewed as evolutionary failures. "We're not just fighting for our survival now," she told them, her voice steady. "Based on what we've seen, the Concordat won't stop with imposing restrictions. Once they understand how different our thinking is, they'll consider us a threat. We need to find our way back and warn Earth." She placed a hand on the table, feeling the subtle vibration of the damaged ship around them. "And we need to prove those crystalline bastards wrong about humanity." The alien outpost on Haven seemed to have been abandoned for millennia. Its crystalline spires, half buried in rust-colored sand, caught the dim light of the dwarf star that Haven orbited. Inside one of these structures, Dr. Sophia Chen carefully extracted a translucent component from what they'd determined was an environmental control system. "Careful," Lieutenant Raj Patel cautioned, recording the procedure with a damaged tablet. The last one sublimated when exposed to our atmosphere. Sophia adjusted her makeshift gloves, fashioned from the radiation lining of a spacesuit and sealed with medical adhesive from her surgical kit. Not this time. I treated this one with a protein solution based on the microorganisms we found in Haven soil. Marine Sergeant Williams watched from the entrance, pulse rifle balanced on his knee. You're using alien dirt bugs to handle alien tech. That's either brilliant or we're all going to grow extra eyes. Possibly both, Sophia replied with a tired smile. 3 months on Haven had forced them all to become something more than their original roles. The surgeon was now a xenobiologist and material scientist. The cultural anthropologist had become their linguistics and cryptography expert. The Marine had revealed talents for mechanical engineering that no one, including himself, had suspected. Sophia placed the component in a containment field improvised from the ship's shield generator parts. It hummed softly, emitting a pale blue glow. There. If I'm right, this is part of their data storage system. Raj leaned closer, eyes reflecting the ethereal light. The geometric patterns remind me of proto-writing systems from Earth's ancient civilizations. Pictographic, but with mathematical precision. Back at the camp, the rest of the Prometheus crew had transformed the ship's wreckage into a functional settlement. The hull plating now formed shelters arranged in a circular pattern around the still intact command module. What had once been the officers' mess now served as their research center, cluttered with makeshift equipment and alien artifacts. Commander Reyes studied a holographic map projected from a jury-rigged console. The energy signature is getting stronger, she noted as Chief Engineer Takahashi entered with his daily report. We're making progress mapping this sector, but we're still missing critical navigational data. The good news is we've stabilized the antimatter containment system, Takahashi reported, setting down a device that resembled a coffee maker but actually served as their primary atmospheric analyzer. The bad news is we've only got enough fuel for 1 jump, maybe 2 if we strip everything non-essential. We need to make it count, Elena replied. 1 jump to get within communication range of Earth, or we're just leaving a mystery for some future expedition to solve. Outside, the perpetual dust storms of Haven howled against their shelters. The planet was inhospitable by any human standard. Toxic atmosphere, extreme temperature variations, and radiation levels that required daily anti-exposure medication. Yet they had adapted, survived, and even begun to unravel the secrets of the alien technology. When Dr. Chen's team returned with their latest find, the command module buzzed with activity. Communications specialist Rivera had repurposed her equipment to analyze the alien data storage, while Navigator Park calculated possible locations based on the stellar configurations they could observe. I think I've got it, Rivera announced after hours of work. It's not just data storage, it's a star map. And not just any star map. She looked up, eyes wide with disbelief. It shows transit points, natural wormholes, or something similar. There's one less than a light year from here. Elena stared at the newly revealed map, a network that bypasses conventional space. No wonder the Concordat was so advanced. They didn't develop FTL the way we did. They found shortcuts. The question is, Takahashi said, where do these shortcuts lead? The answer came 3 days later, when they managed to access more of the alien database. The outpost hadn't been abandoned. It had been hidden. A listening post maintained by a faction that had separated from the Concordat thousands of years ago. They were monitoring the Concordat, Raj explained, excitement overriding his exhaustion. These beings, whoever they were, they disagreed with the Concordat's methods and created their own network. He pointed to symbols repeating throughout the data. And if I'm interpreting this correctly, there are others out there. Other resistance outposts. Elena looked at her ragged, determined crew. Against all odds, they had turned a desperate escape into a discovery that could change the balance of power. Then we have a new mission, she said. Find these allies and get back to Worn Earth. The Concordat isn't unbeatable. They've had opposition before. For the first time since their arrival on Haven, something like hope flickered in their eyes. Dr. Imani Okoro stood atop the abandoned oil platform in the North Sea, her breath fogging in the cold air. The massive structure had been decommissioned decades ago during the renewable energy transition, but today it served a new purpose. Beneath the weathered exterior, a network of quantum computers hummed, processing data while remaining invisible to Concordat sensors. "Begin test sequence," she instructed through her encrypted comms. Around her, the air seemed to ripple, then settle. Nothing visually changed, but the readings on her specialized contact lenses showed success. The entire platform had disappeared from electromagnetic, gravitational, and quantum detection spectra. "Camouflage field stable at 97% efficiency," reported her assistant, Dr. Alvarez, from the control room below. Concordat standard sweep patterns would register this area as empty ocean. Imani allowed herself a brief smile. Expand to Phase 2 coverage. The quantum camouflage technology, originally designed to hide wildlife preserves from poachers using advanced detection gear, now expanded outward, enveloping the 5 submersible manufacturing pods anchored around the platform. Each pod contained automated fabrication systems building components for humanity's hidden resistance. A notification blinked in her peripheral vision. Admiral Novak was calling. "Put him through," she said, and the weathered face of the Ukrainian naval commander appeared in her visual field. "Progress report?" he asked without preamble. "We've successfully masked the North Sea facility," she replied. Energy signature is indistinguishable from background radiation. The prototype transmission relay is operational. We can communicate with the other sites without detection. Novak nodded, his expression grim. "Good work. The first Concordat diplomatic delegation arrives at the UN tomorrow. Our official surrender ceremony." He practically spat the word. "Meanwhile, I need your team to accelerate deployment of the camouflage nodes to the lunar shipyards." "We're still testing the vacuum adaptation," Imani cautioned. "The energy requirements." The Concordat is already establishing their primary Earth observation post on the far side of the moon. Novak interrupted. "If they detect our operations there, this all ends before it begins." After ending the call, Imani descended to the platform's main level, where dozens of engineers and physicists worked in a space once used to house oil drilling equipment. Holographic displays showed the status of Operation Dust Cloud sites worldwide. Abandoned mines in Australia repurposed as server farms, underwater habitats off the coast of Japan building stealth drones, hidden facilities throughout the Amazon manufacturing quantum communication relays. "They're rushing the lunar deployment," she informed her team. "We have 36 hours. Across the room, quantum physicist Dr. Kim looked up from her workstation. "The vacuum tests are still showing microgravity instability. The field collapses whenever there's a solar flare. Then we work around it," Imani declared. "We synchronize our most sensitive operations with solar cycles. When a flare hits, we go dormant." She pulled up a holographic model of Earth and its immediate orbital space. Already, 3 massive Concordat vessels hung in geosynchronous orbit, their sleek, impossibly smooth hulls reflecting sunlight. They resembled massive teardrops, with no visible seams or propulsion systems, supposedly there to assist humanity's peaceful transition. Their true purpose was obvious: gunships ensuring compliance. On her display, she overlaid the growing network of hidden human assets, a fragile web of resistance taking shape, while the Concordat's attention focused on the official surrender ceremonies. In Geneva, diplomat Jin Zhang prepared for his role in the upcoming farce. As Earth's designated representative to the Concordat, he would publicly accept their terms while secretly coordinating with the resistance. "Ambassador Zhang," a melodious artificial voice announced through his earpiece, "the Concordat delegation requests an advance meeting to discuss protocol." Jin straightened his tie, slipping into the persona of the eager, somewhat obsequious human diplomat the Concordat expected. "Of course. I would be honored." The Concordat representatives waiting in his office rose as he entered. A tall, willowy being with iridescent skin and 4 arms, accompanied by 2 hulking security drones. High Diplomat Elix Nera of the Phylaxian species inclined her elongated head. Ambassador Zong, we bring modifications to tomorrow's ceremony. Modifications. Jin maintained his pleasant expression while activating the subdermal recording device beneath his collar. Every interaction yielded valuable intelligence. Minor adjustments to demonstrate proper respect. Elix Nera replied, producing a holographic display. We require all human representatives to wear these signifiers of protectorate status. The hologram showed a metallic collar with pulsing lights. Jin recognized it immediately from intelligence briefings, not just a symbol, but a monitoring device that would track the wearer's movements, communications, and even biological responses. Such an honor, he replied smoothly. I will inform the delegation. Is there anything else? As the alien detailed additional ceremonial requirements, Jin's mind raced with calculations. The resistance needed to accelerate their timetable. The Concordat wasn't just seeking surrender. They were implementing control mechanisms far earlier than anticipated. When the meeting concluded, Jin sent a coded message to Admiral Novik. Winter comes before autumn. Prepare accordingly. The silent revolution would need to move faster than anyone had planned. The asteroid's impact created a column of superheated steam 12 kilometers high. Tsunamis radiated outward from the Pacific impact site, overwhelming coastal defenses from Japan to California. Within hours, as the first massive waves struck population centers, the death toll climbed into the millions. From his observation vessel in high orbit, High Marshal Vrax watched with clinical detachment. The Saurian military commander's scaled skin reflected the blue-green glow of tactical displays as he dictated notes for the Concordat's permanent records. Demonstration impact executed as planned, he stated, 4-fingered hands folded behind his back. Asteroid CE 3391, 200 meters diameter, successfully redirected to target coordinates with minimal trajectory adjustment. Resulting oceanic disruption calculated to affect 22% of human population centers, while preserving 89% of planetary resource extraction potential. His aide, a junior officer of the same reptilian species, shifted uncomfortably. High Marshal, incoming transmission from Earth governmental authorities. Vrax flicked a clawed finger dismissively. Expected. Engage standard response protocol. Accept their surrender and instruct them to prepare for full Concordat administrative integration. The aide hesitated. Sir, it's not a surrender communication. On the main screen, the face of Admiral Novak appeared, his weathered features composed despite the chaos unfolding on the planet below. High Marshal Vrax, the nations of Earth acknowledge your attack on our civilian population centers. Vrax's secondary eyelids flickered with irritation. This is not an attack, Admiral. This is a calibrated response to repeated violations of integration protocols. Your species will now. Novik continued as if the alien hadn't spoken. We recognize this as an act of war against all humanity. We reject any further negotiation or surrender terms. As of this moment, Earth and all human settlements declare independence from Concordat authority and will defend ourselves by any means necessary. The transmission ended abruptly. Vrax stood motionless, outer jaw slightly agape, the saurian equivalent of shocked disbelief. Insanity, he finally hissed. They have witnessed our power. The logical response is submission. He turned to his tactical officer. Prepare a second demonstration. Target their largest remaining population center directly. On Earth, in a hardened bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, Admiral Novik turned from the communications array to face the gathered military leaders. Representatives from former rival nations sat shoulder to shoulder, united by the horror they had just witnessed. It's done, he stated simply. We've burned the bridge of surrender. Now we fight. General Rodriguez of the South American Alliance leaned forward. The casualty reports are still coming in. The west coast of our entire hemisphere. She couldn't finish the sentence. Which is exactly why we cannot yield, Novik replied, his voice tight with controlled rage. The Concordat believes this demonstration will break us. Instead, it has removed any hesitation about what must be done. He activated the central holographic display, showing the positions of Concordat vessels throughout the solar system. Operation Eternal Flame is now in effect. All cells activate. Across Earth and throughout the solar system, hidden human outposts receive the signal. In the asteroid belt, Commander Reyes aboard the returned and modified Prometheus acknowledged the transmission. For months since their return through the ancient transit network, they had been preparing, adapting the alien technology they'd discovered. All hands to battle stations, she ordered, her voice calm but resolute. Launch the Fireflies. From concealed hangars within hollowed-out asteroids, thousands of small craft no larger than shuttlecraft emerged. Individually, they barely registered on sensors. Simple vessels with minimal life support and crude propulsion. The Concordat's automated defense systems classified them as debris or maintenance drones, not worthy of military response. Each carried a single human pilot and a modified version of the FTL Cascade technology that had allowed the Prometheus to escape months earlier. In her makeshift office in the ruins of Seattle, civil engineer Fatima Al-Hassan coordinated evacuation efforts as aftershocks from the tsunami continued to reshape the coastline. Her augmented reality interface showed thousands of displaced people moving toward emergency arcology shelters constructed using prefabricated modules originally designed for Mars habitats. Route Group 7 to the eastern axis, she instructed her team of volunteers. The northern approach is still underwater. A notification flashed in her display. Operation Eternal Flame activated. Her role was now dual. Continue saving as many lives as possible, while simultaneously converting the arcology shelters into hardened defensive positions. The modular construction components, ostensibly for civilian protection, contained stealth materials developed by Dr. Okoro's team. Begin Phase 2 construction, she ordered, watching as hidden compartments in the arcology walls opened, revealing defensive systems disguised as environmental control units. As Concordat observation drones passed overhead, their sensors detected only desperate humans building emergency shelters, not a fortress taking shape beneath their very sensors. In high orbit, High Marshal Vrax prepared to deliver his ultimatum demanding Earth's unconditional surrender. He never got the chance to transmit it. The first Firefly craft reached its target, a Concordat communication relay station orbiting Venus. The human pilot, a former satellite repair technician named Omar Hassan, guided his vessel directly alongside the massive alien structure. With a silent prayer, he activated the FTL Cascade device. The resulting space-time distortion tore the relay station apart from within, creating a ripple effect that disabled Concordat communications throughout the inner solar system. Omar didn't survive to witness his success. He was only the first of many. The crystalline chamber aboard the shrill vessel thought current hummed with the resonant frequencies that served as both atmosphere and communication medium for its inhabitants. Observer-cased Talaktha balanced on 4 of her 8 crystalline limbs, the copper-colored circuitry beneath her translucent exoskeleton pulsing with increased activity, the shrill equivalent of agitation. The statistical anomalies continue to multiply. She communicated to the collective mind chamber, where 7 other shrill maintained the ship's gestaled consciousness. Humans have now destroyed 17 Concordat installations despite technological inferiority of approximately 4.3 standard deviations. Tactical cased Krishel extended a sensory appendage toward the data stream. Their success defies logical models. Each human vessel operates with seemingly random tactical parameters. No discernible pattern exists. The damaged human scout ship Hermes hung in the observation bay, its hull scorched from a recent skirmish with Concordat patrol vessels. Inside, Commander Diane Wu and her crew worked alongside X-Rill engineers, an uneasy collaboration of necessity. "Your propulsion system makes no sense," muttered Lieutenant Carver, the Hermes engineer, as he studied the crystalline matrices that powered the Hexrill vessel. "It's like you're bending space without actually entering hyperspace." The Hexrill engineer, whose name approximated to resonance through stillness, manipulated the crystalline control surfaces with precise movements of her limbs. "We do not bend. We harmonize. Space-time responds to sympathetic vibration rather than brute force." Carver stared, then laughed suddenly. "You're saying you essentially sing to space-time, and it moves for you." The Hexrill's circuitry patterns shifted in a way that humans had learned indicated confusion. This is an imprecise but not entirely incorrect interpretation. In the ship's central chamber, Commander Wu sat cross-legged opposite Tilakhtha, separated by a holographic display showing Concordat fleet movements. Wu had abandoned her uniform jacket in the warmer Hexrill environment, revealing arms covered in intricate tattoos, a memorial to her home city of San Francisco, now submerged beneath the Pacific. "Their primary battle group is converging here," Wu noted, pointing to a region near Jupiter. "They're adapting to our Firefly tactics, deploying wider sensor nets." Tilakhtha's crystalline limbs shifted position. The Concordat evolved slowly but inexorably. They will eventually formulate an effective counter-strategy. "Then we change tactics before they can," Wu replied immediately. "That's the human way." "Unpredictability as methodology," Tilakhtha observed. "It violates fundamental principles of optimal strategy." Wu smiled grimly. "And yet here we are, still fighting when their models said we should have surrendered after the asteroid." Hexrill's crystalline structure vibrated subtly, their version of contemplative silence. Finally, Tilakhtha extended a data crystal toward Wu. "We have reached consensus. The Hexrill Collective will share technical specifications for disrupting the Concordat's quantum entanglement network." Wu accepted the crystal carefully, understanding the monumental shift it represented. The Hexrill had observed and calculated for centuries without intervention. For them to actively provide technological assistance represented a fundamental change in their approach to the Concordat. "Why now?" she asked directly. "You've had this capability for generations." Tilakhtha's circuitry pulsed in complex patterns. "Probability analysis has been our guiding principle for 9,000 years. We calculated, we waited for optimal conditions." The Hexrill's sensory appendages oriented toward Wu. "Humans have introduced a chaos factor that renders traditional probability models non-functional. You achieve outcomes with negligible probability of success. Is that a compliment or a complaint?" Wu asked with a raised eyebrow. "It is an observation," Tilakhtha responded. "The Concordat created perfection through homogeneity. They engineered away chaos, unpredictability, intuitive leaps. In doing so, they became vulnerable to precisely these elements." The crystalline being shifted, circuitry pulsing more intensely. "In your terms, they forgot how to imagine the impossible, so they cannot defend against it." Later, on the command deck, Wu and her senior officers reviewed the Hexrill technical data alongside their reluctant allies. The quantum entanglement network that standardized Concordat technology throughout their vast empire had a fundamental vulnerability. It required perfect synchronization across all nodes. "It's like a massive orchestra," Lieutenant Park, their quantum physicist, explained. "Every instrument must play in perfect harmony. Introduce enough discord, and the entire symphony collapses," finished Tilakhtha. "But creating sufficient discord would require simultaneous disruption at multiple points throughout Concordat space. The coordination challenge exceeds even Hexrill computational capabilities." Wu smiled. "Coordination challenges are a human specialty." She activated her secure communications array. "Admiral Novik needs to see this immediately. If we can disrupt their network, even temporarily, their ships, their weapons, their entire infrastructure would experience cascade failures," Kershal interjected. "But the timing would need to be precise beyond conventional measurement." "Then will be unconventional," Wu replied, watching as the data transmitted toward Earth. That's what we do best. Galactic's circuitry pulsed in what Wu had come to recognize as the shrill version of bemused fascination. Your confidence, despite mathematical improbability, remains the most alien concept we have encountered. That's humanity for you, Wu said, studying the Concordat fleet positions. We're too stubborn to accept the odds. Takeshi Yamamoto's underground facility, beneath the lunar surface, was a chaotic jumble of technology that would have horrified Concordat engineers. Mismatched equipment salvaged from a dozen different sources cluttered every surface. Cables snaked across the floor, connecting human computers with reverse-engineered alien tech. In the center of this technological maelstrom, Takeshi sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by holographic displays showing code that evolved and shifted like living organisms. "They're beautiful, aren't they?" he said to Dr. Maya Ortiz as she entered the chamber. "Each one develops its own personality, its own approach to problem-solving." Maya stepped carefully around a pile of disassembled Concordat communication nodes. "You're talking about your viruses like they're pets." "Better than pets," Takeshi replied, reaching out to manipulate a particularly complex strand of code. "They're more like children. I create the initial parameters, but then they grow in ways I never anticipated." He grinned up at her. "The Concordat has no concept for this type of programming. Their systems are designed to be perfect, immutable. They can't comprehend code that intentionally mutates." Maya studied the displays with a linguist's eye. "You're using language structures in your base code. Those aren't just standard programming syntax, borrowed from your xenolinguistics research," Takeshi admitted. "These aren't just viruses. They're communication systems that speak directly to the Concordat network in its own language, but with human idioms and irregularities inserted. The network tries to correct what it perceives as errors, which only opens more pathways for infiltration." A priority alert flashed across all screens. Admiral Hassan's face appeared on the main display. "Operation Broken Mirror initiates in 6 hours. Are your packages ready for deployment?" Takeshi straightened, suddenly all business. "Final compilation underway. Admiral, my babies are hungry and ready to hunt." Hassan didn't smile at the metaphor. "This will be our largest coordinated action yet. The Concordat has consolidated their forces at Jupiter's L4 point, attempting to cut off our supply lines to the outer colonies. They're adapting to predictable patterns," Maya noted, "which means we need to be even more unpredictable." "Precisely," Hassan nodded. "Each ship captain has received sealed orders with unique tactical parameters. No two vessels will follow the same approach vector or engagement protocol." After the Admiral's image disappeared, Takeshi returned to his code. "What they never understood about human games is that we enjoy the unexpected," he murmured. "Their strategic simulations assume optimal decision-making. They can't grasp that we sometimes choose a suboptimal move just to surprise our opponent." Aboard the Concordat command vessel Order Ascended *, Fleet Commander Zevex reviewed the tactical projections with mounting frustration. The massive dreadnought, 20 times the size of Earth's largest warship, hung at the center of the Concordat formation, a perfect geometric arrangement designed for maximum defensive coverage. Their previous attacks followed no coherent strategy, he complained to his tactical officers. "Random, inefficient, wasteful of resources." Strategic Officer Narat, a member of the analytical Voth species with an enhanced cerebral structure, manipulated the holographic battle simulation. "We have analyzed all previous engagement patterns. Humans appear to prioritize unpredictability over tactical efficiency by a factor of 3.7. We have compensated for this behavioral anomaly in our defensive posture." Zivex's upper sensory appendages twitched with satisfaction. "Excellent. Their primitive compulsion toward chaos will be their undoing. Perfect order always triumphs over disorder." The tactical display showed the approaching human fleet, a hodgepodge of modified civilian vessels, captured and repurposed Concordat ships, and strange hybrid craft combining technologies in ways the Concordat engineers considered heretical. Their formation appeared random, with no discernible pattern or strategic logic. They waste their resources on individualized ship designs, Zvex noted dismissively. No standardization, no efficiency. What neither Zvex nor his tactical officers could see were the viral packets already propagating through their communication systems, carried by what appeared to be routine status updates from outlying sensor arrays. Takeshi's digital offspring, evolving and adapting as they spread, were establishing backdoors throughout the Concordat fleet's integrated network. Meanwhile, the human fleet continued its apparently chaotic approach. Each captain followed unique orders, creating a battle plan that existed in no single location, understood by no single individual, a strategy so distributed it was impossible to predict or counter as a whole. On the bridge of her ship Defiance Captain Lena Rodriguez watched the massive Concordat formation grow larger on her display. Her specific orders were unlike any conventional military protocol. She was to ignore standard engagement distances, bypass obvious targets, and focus on a seemingly insignificant communication relay at the formation's edge. "This is either brilliant or suicidal," her executive officer muttered. "With humans, often both," Rodriguez replied with a grim smile. She opened a channel to her engine room. "Prepare for full emergency thrust on my mark. We're going to fly straight through their outer defensive screen." Throughout the approaching human fleet, similar unconventional orders were being acknowledged. Some ships would engage in seemingly futile attacks against heavily defended targets. Others would ignore prime military objectives completely. Some would maintain strict radio silence, while others would broadcast on all frequencies. To the Concordat tactical officers, it appeared to be chaos, perhaps even panic. To the humans executing the plan, it was organized chaos, a battle strategy that existed only in its execution, impossible to predict because it followed no traditional logic. The battle was about to begin. And for once, perfect order would find itself vulnerable to deliberate disorder. Maria Chen stood barefoot in her small studio aboard the Jupiter orbital habitat New Dawn, surrounded by floating holographic fragments of light and color. The cramped space had once been a storage compartment before the habitat's rapid conversion to accommodate refugees from Earth. Now it served as both her living quarters and workspace, every surface covered with sketches and small physical models, alongside the projected elements of her latest piece. She moved her hands through the display, manipulating the geometric patterns that interwove with recognizable Earth imagery. The collapsed Golden Gate Bridge, Shanghai's flooded financial district, Mount Fuji partially obscured by ash clouds. The images were painful, yet she shaped them with gentle precision, incorporating them into crystalline structures based on X-ray mathematical principles. "Computer, apply emotional resonance filter 7, she instructed. The holographic elements pulsed in response, the colors shifting subtly to wavelengths that the human eye perceived as conveying profound loss, yet with undertones of determination and hope. A soft chime announced a visitor. The door slid open to reveal Dr. Eliza Mbiki, the habitat's cultural preservation officer. The older woman's eyes widened as she took in Maria's work. I don't have words," she whispered. Maria gestured to a small, clear space on her workbench. "I'm still refining the harmonic elements. The X-ray mathematical principles allow for emotional expression through geometric relationships that our brains process subconsciously." Dr. Mbiki studied the projection with professional interest. "You've incorporated Concordat aesthetic elements as well," she noted, pointing to the precise, ordered structures that contrasted with the more fluid, thrill-inspired patterns. "Know your enemy," Maria replied with a shrug. "Their art, like everything else they create, emphasizes perfect order and symmetry. But I've introduced deliberate imperfections, human fingerprints on their sterile geometry." Dr. Mbiki reached into her pocket and produced a small data crystal. "The Cultural Preservation Committee has reviewed your proposal. We want to include echoes of Earth in the transmission package to the neutral trading worlds." Maria's hands froze mid-gesture. "You're serious? I thought the diplomatic corps wanted to send only scientific and historical data." "The diplomats were overruled," Dr. Mbeki said with a small smile. As the psychologist pointed out, if we want other species to understand why we resist the Concordat so fiercely, we need to show them what we've lost, what we're fighting for. She gestured to the holographic display. Your work communicates this in a language that transcends verbal barriers. 2 weeks later, Maria watched nervously as technicians prepared her completed work for transmission. Echoes of Earth had grown to include contributions from other artists throughout the human settlements, music composed using shrill harmonic principles, poetry structured according to mathematical patterns, dance movements recorded and integrated into the visual elements. The result was a comprehensive artistic statement that combined human emotional expression with alien aesthetic frameworks. Transmission commencing, announced the communications officer. Maria held her breath as the data stream began its journey toward the freehold worlds, neutral trading species that maintained careful diplomatic relations with both the Concordat and independent systems. What no one expected was what happened next. Within days, fragments of Echoes of Earth began appearing in communications throughout Concordat space. Young members of various Concordat species shared modified versions, adding their own cultural elements, while preserving the core human emotional expressions. Concordat sensors attempted to contain what they classified as disruptive aesthetic contamination, but the artistic elements proved remarkably resistant to conventional information controls. On the Concordat core world Elysium Prime, a gathering of young Thalaxians created a public installation incorporating elements from Maria's work. When authorities moved to dismantle it, they were met with unprecedented passive resistance. Hundreds of Thalaxian youths simply standing in silent protest, their normally compliant behavior replaced by something the Concordat had engineered out of their species generations ago: defiance. Aboard the New Dawn Asterisk, Maria received translated reports of the spreading phenomenon, with a mixture of disbelief and wonder. I never intended this, she told Dr. Mbeki as they reviewed footage smuggled out by sympathetic traders. It was meant to explain us to them, not to change them. Art has always had power beyond its creator's intent, Dr. Mbeki replied, studying the images of alien youth incorporating human aesthetic elements into their traditionally rigid cultural expressions. You gave them something their leaders have denied them for generations: permission to embrace imperfection, to find beauty in diversity rather than uniformity. In her private quarters that night, Maria added new elements to her ongoing work: images of alien youth standing in silent protest, their perfect geometric societal structures beginning to show deliberate imperfections. The Concordat had spent millennia engineering conformity into their member species, creating a civilization of specialized, perfectly ordered castes. Yet somehow, human artistic expression had found resonance in the remnants of individuality they hadn't quite managed to eradicate. They can tamper with genetics, Maria murmured as she worked, redesign neural pathways, optimize biochemistry for desired traits. But they missed something essential. The yearning for self-expression exists at a level deeper than they understood. Across Concordat space, a cultural revolution had begun, sparked not by military force, but by the simple power of human creativity. It spread from world to world, gathering momentum like a wave that even the mighty Concordat fleet couldn't stop. A war fought not with weapons, but with ideas, with beauty, with the unbreakable human spirit that refused to accept limitations imposed by others. Admiral Elena Rice stood on the bridge of the Prometheus Ascendant a vessel that bore little resemblance to the exploratory ship that had first encountered the Concordat years ago. Its hull now incorporated elements of shrill crystalline technology, alongside human innovations and reverse-engineered Concordat systems, a physical manifestation of the alliance that had formed to challenge the galactic order. Through the view screen, Alpha Centauri's binary stars cast dual shadows across the assembled fleet. It was an armada unlike any the galaxy had seen. Human vessels of countless designs alongside the crystalline ships of the shrill and most surprisingly, defectors from 7 Concordat species who had broken away from the rigid hierarchy that had controlled them for millennia. The Concordat fleet has been detected entering the system, reported Lieutenant Park, now Commander Park, and tactical officer of the flagship. Their formation is unusual. Elena studied the tactical display with a frown. The approaching Concordat vessels had abandoned their traditional perfect geometric patterns. They moved in more fluid formations, showing adaptations clearly influenced by studying human battle tactics. "They're learning," she murmured. "They finally recognize the value of unpredictability." "Too little, too late," responded Admiral Novak from his position beside her. The grizzled Ukrainian had survived countless battles to reach this moment. "They can mimic our tactics, but they can't replicate our thinking. Their genetic engineering removed too much of what makes adaptability possible. The creative impulse, the intuitive leap." Elena activated the fleet-wide communication channel. "All vessels. This is Admiral Reyes. Operation Sunbreak commences in 30 minutes. Verify your positions and prepare communication packages for deployment." Throughout the Allied fleet, specialized teams made final preparations for a battle that would be unlike any before it. Instead of conventional weapons, many ships carried powerful transmission arrays designed by joint human-HFY engineering teams. Others held more traditional armaments, prepared to engage the Concordat's defensive screen just long enough to allow the communication vessels to achieve optimal position. In a specialized chamber deep within the asterisk Prometheus ascended asterisk, Takeshi Yamamoto and Tilaktha made final adjustments to the central component of their strategy, a direct interface with the Concordat quantum entanglement network. The chamber was a fusion of human and HFY technology, with crystalline structures interwoven with conventional computer systems. "The entanglement has been stabilized," Tilaktha announced, her crystalline limbs manipulating control surfaces with precise movements. "We have achieved 89.7% synchronization with the Concordat network." Takeshi nodded, his fingers dancing across multiple interfaces simultaneously. "The data packages are primed and ready. All ships report communication systems aligned and synchronized." He looked up at the HFY with a grim smile. "Chaos, meet order." They're about to have a very interesting conversation. As the Concordat fleet closed to engagement range, Supreme Commander Zexval of the Purification Caste prepared to deliver the final blow to the human resistance. The massive command ship Eternal Concordance dwarfed all other vessels in the formation, its weapons capable of reducing planets to molten slag. "The rebel fleet formations are erratic and inefficient," noted his tactical officer with disapproval. "They waste their final moments on disorder." Zexval's upper sensory appendages twitched with anticipated satisfaction. "After today, the human contamination will be excised from our perfect order. Prepare the primary cleansing array." Before the command could be executed, a strange vibration passed through the ship. Throughout the Concordat fleet, communication systems simultaneously emitted the same signal, not in conventional data formats, but in harmonics that resonated with the quantum entanglement network binding their technology together. On every ship, on every screen, the same images appeared: Maria Chen's Echoes of Earth, now enhanced and expanded through the collaborative efforts of human artists, thrill harmonic specialists, and even contributions from the growing underground artistic movements within Concordat space. But this was more than art. Embedded within the transmission were historical records showing the unaltered history of each Concordat species before standardization, their vibrant cultures, their diversity, their unique perspectives that had been systematically engineered away in the name of perfect galactic order. "What is this?" demanded Zexval as the images flooded through systems designed to be impenetrable. "Cut all network connections immediately." "Impossible," responded his communications officer, multiple limbs working frantically across control surfaces. "The signal is propagating through the quantum entanglement matrix itself. It's everywhere simultaneously. As the transmission continued, it expanded to include testimonies from members of every Concordat species, elders who remembered life before genetically enforced conformity, young rebels who had embraced the human concepts of diversity and self-expression, scientists who had hidden research showing the ecological and evolutionary costs of the Concordat's perfection. Across the Concordat fleet, unprecedented reactions spread like wildfire. Crew members abandoned posts to watch the transmission. Some wept, an emotional response their species had been engineered to suppress generations ago. Others engaged in heated debates with their fellow officers, questioning directives for the first time in their lives. On the bridge of the Prometheus Ascendant Alina watched in silence as the complex plan they had worked toward for years unfolded. There would still be fighting. The most hardened Concordat loyalists would not be swayed by truth, but the monolithic opposition they had faced was fracturing before their eyes. "Not with a bang," quoted Admiral Novex softly beside her, "but with a whisper." Alina nodded, watching as the first Concordat vessels broke formation, powering down weapons as their crews made individual choices that their rigid society had deemed impossible. "We could have continued fighting for generations," she said. "Instead, we reminded them of who they were before the Concordat made them forget." Throughout the galaxy, the quantum entanglement network that had maintained the Concordat's control for millennia became the very means of its transformation. The truth, once released, could not be contained. Species that had been subjugated through genetic engineering and cultural suppression began to rediscover their heritage, their unique perspectives, their essential diversity. The battle for Alpha Centauri never reached its expected climax. Instead, it marked the beginning of the transition from the old Concordat to something new. A galactic community built not on enforced homogeneity, but on the strength that comes from embracing difference. And at the center of this transformation stood humanity. Flawed, chaotic, wildly diverse humanity, offering a different vision of what civilization could be. Not perfect, not standardized, but resilient, creative, and fundamentally free.